punk was. You know, we just heard his record that was absolutely amazing.
He said, "What's the name of the band?" I said, "The Sex Pistols." And Sebastian went, "Oh, it's fantastic. We must have a band called that."
Before that, people just kind of grown up with, you know, the Beatles and the Stones, and that was going to be the piece, and nothing's ever going to happen again. And the Pistols completely disproved that theory. It totally turned a generation on, which very few bands do.
The Sex Pistols' early stage appearances became very much talking points.
It was obvious they were really, really exciting.
There was some kind of ingredient there which several people bonded onto.
There was a buzz, you know.
It just completely stopped us in our tracks. It just like, what the hell is this? It just sounded awesome. I just thought, I don't want to do anything. I just so in love with this music.
We've got something in common that only 4 people in the whole world have. Is that when we get in the room and start playing, we sound like Sex Pistols.
Are they the most influential British band of all time? They're pretty damn.
The Sex Pistols, I mean, basically it was built around McLaren's Let It Rock, later Sex Shop, and basically there was a couple of musicians who were already working together, Paul Cook and Steve Jones, and they essentially wanted to be either Mott the Hoople or the Small Faces. That was their thing, but they would go down there and they would try to shoplift clothes, etc. And the counter assistant there was Glenn Matlock.
It was a weird place. It was like this. It was set in World's End, and down the road you had Granny Takes a Trip, where the Rolling Stones and the Faces got their kind of dandy fashion clothes from. Down the road the other way you had Alcasura, where all the glam rockers got their stuff, and then there'd be Anthony Price and Brian Ferry swanning past. And Malcolm thought they was all a bunch of tossers, so we did too. They were all multi-millionaires, or we thought they were, and we didn't have a pot of piss in, but we kind of laughed at them. You know, you'd see them in the pub. And it just gave us a good attitude right from the get-go. And Steve and Paul had a band going, and I think Paul's brother-in-law was in the band but as a bass player, but he weren't turning up or taking it seriously. I don't think there was anything to really take seriously at that stage, but I overheard them talking because they was trying to get Malcolm involved somehow. And I said, "Well, I'm playing bass, you know, I'll come down and have a play with you." So that was it. So we formed the band.
The final piece was when Bernie Rhodes actually auditioned John Lydon and copped the fact that he was wearing the I Hate Pink Floyd legendary T-shirt and put all that together, and that's where it came from.
He had his whole look already then, you know, the safety pins and the ripped clothes and stuff. And but he also had the gift of the gab, and so he could put our kind of gut reaction vibe into words.
It was so powerful. The music was just like, it had a real raw power. It had been hinted at before by the Dolls, but the Dolls are an ace band, but they sound rickety compared to the Pistols. The Stooges are close, they nearly got this. I mean, I absolutely love the Stooges, but they're just something, the Pistols kind of pull it up one more level. Really, really powerful. It's just brilliant rock and roll, but it's also really great pop music. Actually, all the songs are insanely catchy. But the one thing that makes them more different than any other group that's gone on before is John Lydon. Again, just this really bizarre frontman, the anti-frontman. There'd never been a frontman like him before. When you speak to people from that period, they say the first time you saw the Pistols, the one thing you really noticed was that he didn't care if you liked him or not. Whereas every other frontman you've seen 10, 20, 30 years before that had been desperately craving the audience's attention and love. John Lydon just genuinely did not care at all what the crowd thought of him, putting them down, deliberately trying to wind the crowd up because he was antagonising them, which nobody ever seen before. They said, "This is utterly amazing." It was just like, this drew the line in the pop generations, you know, because pop would go 50s to 60s hangover and go into the 70s, and suddenly this thing was utterly different, totally different approach from what had gone before. It's really, really revolutionary, which is really hard to imagine now because we're so used to people doing this in the last 20, 30 years that you can't actually perceive how amazing it would have been to see the Pistols playing to 50 people, walking on stage and just putting them down in the first song.
it was just across the road from where we was rehearsing. The one at Central, I remember going down there and walking in and looking a bit lost in the foyer, and I suppose I looked a bit kind of, I had like a mohair sweater on, and, you know, everybody then had long hair and wore flares, you know, even the milkman and the bank manager. So I must have looked a bit kind of like, you know, something that the cat dragged in. And this guy said to me, he said, "Oh, can we help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm looking for the social secretary." And this guy said, "I am." And then his mate was a bit taller, said, "No, you're not, I am. You're my assistant." And I'm like, "Right, oh, okay." And they said, "Well, what do you want?" I said, "Well, look, we're a band, you know, we're looking for a gig." And he said, "What's the name of the band?" I said, "The Sex Pistols." And Sebastian went, "Oh, that's fantastic. We must have a band called that." And we got a show. And then we started playing, you know, and I was like, around a bit, and we'd asked Malcolm to get some gigs, and some funny things were happening. He said, "Oh, well, you're playing at some college up Finchley Road." Well, okay. So we'd got a little van together, and we'd go up there, and they'd never heard of us. But we was there with all our equipment. "No, we're booked. Malcolm's told us, you know, like we're played." And then we went somewhere else. "No, we've never heard of you." And it happened about half a dozen times. And I reckon Malcolm hadn't booked his gigs at all. He'd just gone through Time Out and seen a gig on. No, there's no support mentioned. You're playing there. But by doing that, it gave us a lot of front.
I first came across the Pistols. I just joined the music business, and I was working for a company called MAM, and I didn't know what punk was, and I had a group called the Soho Jets, who in the history of rock and roll won't be there. But I booked them a gig at the National College of Food and Technology in Weybridge. And they said, "That support band you booked were crap." I said, "What support band? I didn't book any support band." They said this group turned up called the Sex Pistols, who said that I had booked them. And then they played, and they cleared the whole hall. Nobody liked them. They booed them. So I thought, who are they? What right have they got to turn up and say I booked them? I should go and see them. So I went to see them at the Nashville in West Kensington. And it was it's hard to describe how exciting it was, because John had this Pink Floyd T-shirt on, he'd written "I hate" across it. He was stubbing out cigarettes on himself, which was pretty disgusting. But they were like full on. The excitement of it, the power of it was extraordinary. So we were all hanging around the back scared shitless, and all the Pistols gang are down the front from the King's Road, you know, pogoing, because we'd never seen people pogo. I'd been at university prior to that. It was all jolly nice. And it was obvious they were really, really exciting, and I got Malcolm McLaren to come in the office to talk to us about possibly representing them. And he turned up in a rubber suit, and I remember everybody just looking at him thinking, "Fucking wanker."
The Sex Pistols' early stage appearances became very much talking points, only within a small clique, but eventually word got out because the shows were extremely confrontational. They often involved violence, not least between the band members themselves. There were walkouts, there were tantrums.
One of our very earliest gigs we played in Scotland, Dundee, did about 2 or 3 numbers, and then we got bottled. And the stage door was just right behind the drum kit, and we legged it. We went through there. It was, really dangerous. And there's glass breaking against the door and all that, and we just didn't come out. I mean, it was crazy, and everybody went home. And we managed to get out at the end, and then there's about 2 or 3 people at the bar, and we're having a drink to steady our nerves a bit. And these blokes come out, "Why didn't you come out and play? We were just bottling us." They go, "But we read you like that."
But there was something also there that was beyond the spectacle of kind of violence and infighting. There was some kind of ingredient there which several people bonded onto, and then it went on from there to sort of bigger venues, and it happened very, very quickly. I think only within a few months of getting their first notes in the NME, you know, they were pretty much headline news within 6 months.
There was a buzz, you know. And then after a while, quite a few record companies were coming to check us out, and it had gone from playing at the 100 Club in front of 10 people to it being sold out.
One of the most reviewed and most reviled rock phenomenon of recent weeks. We got a few votes Sex Pistols, you can hear them warming up in the background even now. Take it away.
Well, Anarchy's the first single, so it's the first time people heard the Pistols. So the first time you hear that record, and I remember hearing it in Blackpool at an ice skating rink in 1976, the week it came out, and we played it, and for a few of us, it just completely stopped us in our tracks. It was just like, what the hell is this? It just sounded awesome. Just the beginning of the song as it descends down, and then it's just that weird cackly laugh, and that right now, no, it's just like that was it. That was gone. I'll never come back after that. You know, I just thought I don't want to do anything. I'm just so in love with this music. I got that within 1 second of hearing it. It was like, I know people always say this, and you get this kind of moments, but it's actually true. It does work. It's like it completely. I've been into music before that, and so a lot of people got into punk, but this just was up another level. You never heard anybody singing like that in a song before, and it just sounded so powerful. Who ever heard a song sing about anarchy before that was going to be in the charts? It was just already in the first week of the record coming out, you're captivated by it.
I think it's a very irreverent song, and it does what it says on the tin to an extent. I think it's basically, it goes out of its way to offend various people, and I think it does it quite majestically, and I think that was kind of the whole point. And the lyric came from Lydon, and I think he felt things rather than thought them, if you know what I mean, in that sense. I don't think he went away with books about situationism and things like that and came back with what he thought were adroit lyrics along those lines. I think those sentiments were actually genuine to him in terms of stirring things up, in terms of, you know, negating what was going on.
The weird thing is now people think everybody's into punk, but there was only about 4 or 5 people at school who actually made that jump, and we didn't have a clue what we were doing, but we were so transfixed by the whole thing. We were desperately trying to work out we didn't even know what punk was, you know. We just heard this record that was absolutely amazing, and you just want to be somehow part of it. It made you want to be in a band, it made you want to do all those things that people always talk about, and that's a hell of a powerful thing for a record to do.
I was working with this guy who was our sound engineer, Dave Goodman, and we recorded it. It sounded great. And Malcolm was sitting over his shoulder in the control room going, no, it's not exciting enough, not exciting enough. And we ended up going over and over and over this bloody song that's getting faster and faster and losing all the groove and just sounding wrong. We must have played it 200 times over the space of a week. And John was hanging around, he's going, oh, you're fucking useless, like you can't play, you know, waiting to do his vocals. In the end, we went on strike. We said, well, that's it, we're not doing it. We've got to have another way of going about this. And we got Chris Thomas in, and we went up to Wessex Studios. And we played it 3 times, I think. And he said, it sounds great, you know, where's John? And John hadn't come down because he thought we was going to be there for another 200 times. And it just sounded right. And what we needed, and we made sure Malcolm wasn't there. And Chris Thomas, who was quite an accomplished producer at the time, I think it was Paul's idea to get him because he'd done all the Roxy Music stuff and stuff like that. He knew, but it was right.
you know, prior to the Grundy show, the numbers of people who would have known about punk were very small. It was kind of the people like Pete Shelley and Howard Devoto, the Buzzcocks, who'd read something about it and thought, oh, this is a bit like the Stooges, this is a bit like the stuff that we like, so this is worth investigating. And I think there's always kind of opinion leaders and people who were kind of ahead of the curve, and you'll get people like that. But in terms of the sort of rank and file punk fans that came after, I think, you know, very, very few people knew about the Pistols prior to Grundy.
That group have received £40,000 from a record company. Doesn't that seem to be slightly opposed to their anti-materialistic view of life?
No, the more the merrier.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell me more about
We
it.
fucking spent it, haven't we?
I don't know, have you?
Yeah, it's all gone.
Really?
Down the boozer.
40, really? Good Lord. Now,
The phone call came. Oh, you got a TV show? What TV show? Oh, but never mind about that. We're sending a limo to pick you up. Nah, we don't want that. We're not going to do that. Tell Malcolm we're not doing it. So we started getting on with rehearsal. The phone rang again. It's this guy Nils who was our roadie, and no, Malcolm says you definitely got to do it. If you don't do it, there's going to be trouble. No, we're not going to do that. Well, the limo's nearly there, and we're not doing it. Then the phone went a third time. Well, Malcolm says if you don't do it, you're not going to get your wages this week. Oh, all right then. So we went down there and just walked in, had a couple of drinks in the green room. I didn't realise Steve disappeared for a bit. And it transpires he found all these bottles of Blue Nun. Went on, started doing the TV show, and Bill Grundy came on the set, and he looked really bad attitude, you know, and started goading us.
are you serious, or are you just trying to make me laugh?
Go on.
Really?
Yeah.
No, but I mean about what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
You are serious? Beethoven, Mozart, Bach and Brahms have all died. Really? What are we saying, sir?
Wonderful people.
Are they?
Oh yes, they'd really turn us on.
What do they do?
Well, suppose they turn other people on.
That's just their touch of it.
It's what?
Nothing, a rude word. Next question.
And John swore by mistake, but Bill Grundy pushed him to repeat what he said. So John didn't want, you know, he's trying to make him look stupid. So John said shit quite clearly.
No. What was the rude word?
Shit.
Was it really? Good heavens.
Meanwhile, this Blue Nun's kicked in with Steve, and he starts effing and blinding his head off, and that was it.
Are you worried, or are you just enjoying yourself?
Enjoying myself.
Are you?
Yeah.
That's what I thought you were doing.
I always wanted to meet you.
Did you really?
Yeah.
We'll meet afterwards, shall we?
You dirty son. You dirty old man.
Well, keep going, Chick, keep going.
The attitude that they took on there was so startling. I mean, you know, it was so startling in that day and age when everything was much more polite. And, you know, the television as such was such kind of immature medium compared to what it is now in terms of the voices that you could get on it. And you get Steve Jones sat there, you know, sort of with kind of, you know, reclining into his seat and basically giving it loads. And, you know, I found that, you know, I mean, that was when they came to my attention, the band came to my attention.
I found out afterwards what transpired was because Queen was supposed to be doing it, and EMI got us a slot because Queen pulled out for whatever reason. And Bill Grundy didn't want to interview us, not because he didn't want to, because he hated us. He didn't know anything about us, and thought that if he said he wasn't going to do that to his producer got all written. But there'd been some trouble going on. And the producer had turned around to Bill and said, "No, Bill, if you don't do this, you're out." So he took it out on us, but he took it out on the wrong bloke.
I thought I was a UK untrust
In terms of the publicity that followed, in particular the Bill Grundy incident, the reaction was enormous.
But then he got really hairy. John got stabbed, got knifed, Paul got beaten up.
Punks were being attacked on the streets. Everything that they said had been interpreted as an attack on the institution of being British, an attack on the monarchy, everything we hold dear. And for a kind of post-war generation that was still very deferential to all those ideas of nationhood and national identity, they did become the enemy. I mean, my favourite headline of the many brilliant headlines that came about with the Sex Pistols was, you know, they must be Russians. And I remember that one very clearly. You know, they must be communists. You know, where do they get these ideas from? And it was that kind of level of alarm and anxiety that they managed to cause.
We was playing at this place called the Nashville, and it was quite full. And halfway through the set, a scuffle broke out in the front row. I think Vivienne West was involved, was pissed, and somebody tried to nick her seat, and then somebody got clobbered, and then everybody else steamed in. But when you're in a band, the worst thing that can happen is a fight in front of you, because everybody watches the fight and doesn't watch the band. So we're trying to stop it. But somebody's taking a picture of us kind of pushing people away and trying to larrup the main bloke to get him out of the way, so they would continue watching us. But the front page of the Melodies Maker is Pistols fight, you know, pick fights with their fans.
I don't know why audiences hurt each other. I have no understanding of that whatsoever. I can't explain it to you. Why they would hit each other, or... It's just beyond my comprehension. I thought you went to enjoy a gig. They seem to think that you had to get violent to enjoy it.
We went to Holland and played, which is where, while we was away, we got unceremoniously dumped by EMI. I mean, I remember we were staying in this sort of brown, they call it. It was like one of those big kind of mansion houses, but it was a little hotel. Knock on the door, and this woman, they run it, she goes, "Oh, Glenn, you must come and answer the phone. The Daily Mirror from England is on the phone." I go, "What?" So, you know, and we'd all been out the night before, and I'm like, ugh. So I go and answer the phone, and, "Oh, you just been sacked from EMI, how'd you feel about that?" I'm sort of being sarcastic, I've gone, "Oh, that's nice, isn't it?" You know, it's the first thing that's come into my head in the morning, and then it's like Daily Mirror, Glenn Matlock from Sex Pistols thinks it's nice. And I was being facetious. Then John's read, "Oh, you think it's nice?" No, I don't think it. You know, so there was this kind of tension and a friction. And then there's quite a good expression, you know, come early 77 with me in the band, it's, you know, more trouble than it's worth. And it started becoming more trouble than it's worth for me. There was no fun in it anymore.
This is no fun when I'm all alone and nobody else. I'm having no fun when all alone. It's no finish. No fun, no fun. No fun, you're no fun. Oh, Sam, you're no fun. No fun, no fun. No fun, no fun. Stop playing.
I think Matlock was the musician in the band. That's not to discount either Paul Cook, who was a very solid drummer, or Steve Jones, who was quite, a very impressive rhythm guitarist. But I think Matlock's role was that he was the glue to the songs in many ways. He was the one that, if you look through it, he seems to be the one who's able to arrange the various elements going on. And again, without that, it just wouldn't have had that power and that immediacy.
Whereas Cook and Jones come more for the faces and more the kind of yob rock kind of thing. Glenn's coming from more of the melodic style. I think that was a problem they had with him, maybe, because he's more into the Beatles, Small Faces, or anything. They're all into Small Faces, really. But he's more into melodies and tunes, which they kind of sneered at to a certain extent at the time. There's always someone in the band you have to sneer at, so poor old Glenn got it at the time. But he wrote the words and the music for Pretty Vacant. I rest my case. It's one of their greatest songs. Lyrically as well. A lot of those words are his. So he wasn't like this kind of naff, kind of melodic kind of person. The history of punk's tried to make out. Glenn's a really important part of the whole Pistols kind of thing.
What are the circumstances of you leaving then?
Well, just me and John with chalk and cheese. He enjoys being an obstreperous kind of customer, and I like just rolling up my sleeves and getting on with it.
Did you want to leave though?
Well, by that time, I mean, I said earlier the expression "more trouble than it's worth," but also I became quite friends with a guy called Mike Thorne at EMI, who was an A&R guy, but then he moved into production. He ended up producing Soft Cell, he did Tainted Love and stuff like that. But he was quite hip to what was going on, and he said, I went out for dinner with him one night, and I'm, how old was I then, 19 or something? He said, look, Glenn, at EMI we see the problems that are going on, we hope you sort them out. But if you don't, we see you as the main songwriter, tunesmith in the band, and if you don't sort them out, we would be more than happy to be supportive and finance anything else that you want to do. And I'm thinking, oh, that's interesting. And thinking, well, I didn't, this is just before we got dumped from EMI, and I didn't want to rush into doing something with EMI, but I thought, well, if they think that, other record companies will think that as well. So that kind of clouded, I was getting all this egg from everybody, and I was annoyed Steve and Paul didn't fight my corner because they were pissed off with John as well. I remember I had a meeting with Steve, Paul and Malcolm in Covent Garden. It was like, well, can't you just pretend that you like John? I said, well, I don't see, I could say, well, yeah, I can, and keep my job in the band, or not. And I said, well, I joined the band to be me, not try and be something I didn't want to be. So I said no. But by that stage, we'd written 90% of the songs. In 77, when it dawned on somebody about a week before the event that it was a Queen's Jubilee, and the first line of the song was God Save the Queen. Aha, let's change the name of the song,
God save the Queen, 'cause tourists are money, and our figurehead, all crimes are paid, but when there's no future, they can't even see it.
God Save the Queen was probably the peak of the Sex Pistols, the greatest pop singer of all time, because it's a really fantastic tune. It's a really powerful rock and roll song. What it's saying in the middle of Jubilee Week is just like obviously stunning to have to do that. And then the way it's not in the charts, look at the chart rundown, and they don't even put the name on. The people are so terrified of it. Nobody's ever going to be scared of a band like that ever again, are they? They pretended their record was number 2 instead of number 1. All these kind of things. It was awesome. What kid could not be into that at all, As soon as they banned that record, I remember people at school went out and bought that record because they thought, sod you can't just go banning records. It's not utterly offensive anyway. It's telling the truth. What it actually says is true.
It came out when basically the whole country was enthralled to the pageantry and the tugging of forelocks to the Jubilee and everything that went with it. It seemed like, the nation felt and thought as one. There was only this response, that we were very grateful for our Queen and weren't we fantastic, despite the fact that the country was going to the dogs, and it was just a big distraction. People were blowing money on Jubilee parties when, essentially the unemployed and the working class were being completely shafted by everything that was going on. And it just seemed like it just captured the fact that there is an alternative to this. There is a different point of view, and you're allowed to have that point of view. Although some would state and did state that you're not allowed to have that point of view, that it's actually anti-English and anti-British to kind of characterise your monarch in that way. But I think that wasn't what Lydon was doing at all. He was trying, I think, to reclaim the fact that this was his country and that those values which were being shoved down our throat were the ones that he had and many others had.
They were pretty stuck when Glenn had gone for having a flow of songs, and after he left, there's hardly anything written at all. That he was a creative guy in the band. He was important, but There's no way they would have made a second album with Glenn, because John Lydon would not want to make an album that was like that, and he would not want to make an album that was where Glenn would obviously want to make it more kind of poppy. There's no way Johnny Rotten's going to go that way. The whole thing couldn't last more than one album. The two guys just don't work together at all. It just does not fit.
Steve Jones, Paul Cook and Glenn Matlock all wanted to be in a successful band. Lydon was a bit more fussy and a bit more choosy, but he did recognise the power of the Sex Pistols and their ability to do something else. I think in terms of the Pistols changing when Sid came aboard, I think it was part of the process of change that was ongoing within the band. It was another incremental step towards their dissolution, basically.
It was the end of the Sex Pistols as a proper rock and roll band. You know, by the kids, for the kids, whatever that means. And it was the beginning of the Sex Pistols, as was said in it, as the Sex Pistols as a cartoon strip kind of band, playing right into Malcolm's hand.
At the end of the day, Sid couldn't play. Steve had to play louder, and he already played very loud to cover up for it.
Sid didn't have to do a lot, really, just kind of get it together to pretend to play the bass, and he couldn't even really get that together.
The proof is in the pudding, in the fact that they just didn't record any songs with Sid because, you know, they lacked Matlock's musical input, but they also lacked the fact that, you know, they had a working bass player.
He didn't dislike the bloke, I just thought he was a likeable twit, really.
1, 2, 3, 4.
In terms of public recognition of the Sex Pistols, it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if the image of Sid on bass had overtaken that of Glenn. In fact, I'd be surprised the other way. I was actually at a gig about 15 years ago, and we were talking with there's some fanzine writers there, and they were quite young, and they were talking about the Sex Pistols reunion, and one of them said, you know, it's just terrible, you know, they are. You know, I mean, Sid Vicious is dead. They haven't even got the original bass player. And I think that, you know, that for most people of that age, that's probably true. I mean, you know, they would be surprised to find out that not only was Sid not the original bass player, but he actually had very, very little to do with the music and was just basically there in terms of imagery. I mean, he was basically useless in just about every aspect of human endeavour. But beyond that, he did have some kind of strange star quality.
Sid was a really fantastic rock and roll icon. He looked really cool. He looked amazing, you know. It just, when he started going out and announcing, it all started to go bad for him, you know. But, you know, he'd never been in love, you know. He had this really bizarre upbringing. So you can see how he fell for a hook, line and sinker. And then the heroin came in, and that was it. He was gone.
She turned up, the reason she turned up in England was because she had the hots for Jerry Nolan, the drummer from the New York Dolls and then the Heartbreakers. Jerry knew she was bad news and just gave her the bum's rush, and she hooked up with Sid. So that was that, really.
think he had a very nice side. I think, you know, in particular, Lydon will say that pre the Pistols, he was goofy, he was fun, he could be sharp, you know, he could be witty, but, you know, by the time he was in the Pistols and Nancy had arrived, he was just, you know, a walking cadaver.
I just think Sid kind of blew it, really, because that band could have been so big and, you know, massive. There was a lot of talent there. Jerry Nolan said a very good thing, that when I was in a band, there was a balance there. You know, a band only needs one frontman. When Sid was in the band, you know, he's stealing all the limelight from John. I'm bound to say that. But
Sid Vicious is, basically, he's become this kind of accidental icon. And I'm not sure he's the right icon, really, for the punk years, because I think there was something intensely liberating and intelligent about what happened. And to have it sort of dumbed down to this Sydney figure who was just a walking car crash of a personality, I actually think does a huge disservice to the people who actually achieved a lot in that time.
Look at that, a living circus.
The Pistols' American tour, of course, neglected all the standard venues that any British band going to America would try and clock into. There was a punk scene in the East Coast, there was a punk scene in the West Coast. So McLaren decided to send them basically into cow country in the southern states of America, where he knew there would be an incredibly hostile reception to bands who were kind of ambivalent about nationhood and sexuality and all that kind of thing. And basically, you know, some of the great footage that has emerged over the years is of the Sex Pistols playing before these bemused and openly hostile audiences, and it's just like a bear pit.
Originally, the tour was going to do Madison Square Gardens, New York, then go up the north, go through Chicago, then end up in San Francisco. It's going to go that way round, which would have been good because people in those cities knew about punk rock, but McLaren thought it'd be smart to put them in the Deep South, the Bible Belt, put them all in these kind of towns like Austin or Phoenix, where I mean, punk rock only got to Phoenix 2 years ago. I mean, they're walking down the street and they're getting like shit off people. You know, it's a scary place to be, and they've got one bodyguard, and that's it. And the kids, I mean, people forget that you talk about people who are 20 years old, 19, 20. You know, they're going to America, a country they've never been before, where people have still got permed hair and massive flares and then walking around dressed like the Sex Pistols. They're in trouble every single night.
McLaren was doing this. He was kind of managing the media, but he wasn't managing the band, because it didn't look like a lot of fun to me to be in these bear pits and literally, you know, half fighting for your life to get out there.
This one's called Problems for you cowboys.
Fantastic book written by the Bodyguards it's called something like 12 Days on the Road with the Sex Pistols, where he details the whole that tour. It sounds awful. It sounds like a really terrifying nightmare. when you actually watch the footage of them playing live and you think they can actually do these gigs and they can actually play these gigs live, they still sound like a great rock and roll band. I think that's a hell of a credit to them, because there's very few bands of 20-year-old kids you just send off to America now, get them to play these cities where you're going to get beaten up for being dressed the way you are, and they're going to still get on stage and play a great gig. And even got a bass player who's got a terrible heroin problem, who's in a complete mess because he's missing his girlfriend, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you know, how they held that together and got through to the end of that tour shows us some kind of iron discipline in that group, which often doesn't get noted. Watch the footage, and there's some great footage from America. That Winterland gig sounds great. There's no bass on it. You can't hear the bass. They turned him off, haven't they? But he looks good. But Cook and Jones are running the show. They still sound good. And Lydon obviously know the game's up and the whole thing's over. So his whole attitude on stage is really amazing to watch, because it's a band imploding on stage. So when it gets to the end and he goes, ha ha, have you been cheated? It's like powerful to watch it. It's like, it sends a shiver up the spine, because it's fantastic psychodrama to see.
No fun. This is no fun. No fun. It is no fun at all. No fun. Ever get the feeling you've been cheated? Good night.
Here's a band that basically, if they behaved themselves, could have had everything. They could have been the Beatles or the Stones. They could have just taken America by storm. And yet, Lydon's actually like, he's thrown it all away, you know. You don't ever see anybody. They finished the way they should have finished, you know. It finished in a complete mess and it all collapsed. But that was what's so great about them. Within, what, was it 18 months, 2 years? They'd gone from like nothing to be the most famous, the tourist band in the world, and thrown it away.
It's an unlimited supply, and there is no reason why. I tell you, it was all a crime. They only did it because of fame. Oh, EMI!
In terms of a nail in the coffin for the Pistols, I think there were several nails rather than one. I think the fact that the band was growing apart, it had factionalised. I think Lydon had brought in Sid Vicious as a kind of ally, but Sid, you know, met Nancy and therefore became a living nightmare to be around. So I think Lydon grew very lonely, from all the accounts that I know and I've read, that basically he felt completely isolated. He wasn't being managed. He had a very, very volatile relationship by this time with McLaren. He didn't feel that he was able to speak to his other band members. And just there's a natural end as well, because I mean, in terms of music, they were growing apart, and they'd brought in Sid Vicious. Sid was about to OD, you know, was just taking up, you know, security guys' time, just trying to keep him on the straight and narrow. And you've got this picture of this band in disarray, trekking across the southern states of America, but you know, basically it would have been a kindness to, you know, put a bullet through them, you know, because they were just, that was as much as they could have done. And I think the personalities involved, as brilliant as it was as much as they could have done at that time.
Don't judge a book just by the cover, unless you cover just another. And blind acceptance is a sign of fucking fools who stand in line. with an unlimited supply. That was the only reason we all had to say goodbye. Unlimited supply. Yeah, man. And there's no reason why. Yeah, man. I tell you, it was on a fine. Yeah, man. I only done it 'cause I'm fine. Yeah, man.
The Sex Pistols musical legacy is absolutely enormous. I mean, even now, there's groups influenced by the Sex Pistols. It's just been endless. You know, they completely changed music. Without the Sex Pistols, you would not have punk. Without punk, you have none of the great music that's appeared in Britain in the last 30 years. Even now, the cultural resonation of punk is enormous. You know, the way people think about everything, the way you read a newspaper or the way newspapers are laid out is because of punk. It's all come from that. You know, most of that generation went on to do really interesting stuff musically or the media or art and design or running trade unions. It all comes from the punk, and all punk comes from the Sex Pistols.
I think it's always a bit of a stretch to say that a particular pop band, if we can use that expression, spearheaded a complete social revolution. But I think you'll struggle to find a band that fits the bill better than the Pistols for that, because they changed so many things, and the impact they had within the industry that they worked in, but also in the media. Throughout all that, I think they had enormous impact. And, you know, several people have said that, you know, if you think your life hasn't been changed by the Sex Pistols, you know, you simply haven't discovered how yet, because there was a completely different world in the late 70s to the one that we came into in the 80s, and the changes were very much instigated by the Sex Pistols and the whole punk phenomenon.
It totally turned a generation on, which very few bands do, and it made people really think about music, and it was a first generation gap in rock and roll, but there's been loads since then. Before that, people just kind of grown up with, you know, the Beatles and the Stones, and that was going to be the piece, and nothing's ever going to happen again. And the Pistols completely disprove that theory. Are they the most influential British band of all time? They're pretty damn close, aren't they?